you may have seen in your travels on the internet something called LISPOP, LISPOP.ca, which Barry is a big part of and actually leads. And so Barry, I just ask you to take a second to share with people what LISPOP is, what you've been doing, and what people can expect to see if they go on that website.
Well, it's an acronym for the Laurier Institute for the Study of Public Opinion and Policy. It actually is now 18 years old, started by a retired colleague of mine, Steve Brown, and does a number of things. Although at election time, probably the website is the most interactive part that people would be aware of. There are courses available during the summer that we run. There's a lot of articles written that are available also on our website. There's actually about a half a dozen people that are contributing to it in one way or another. However, at election time, both federally and provincially in Ontario, we put forward a website which includes a map and regular seat projections based upon polls that are available at the time. I think in a minute or two, this will be available for viewers of this particular podcast now. What we have done, the current numbers, this is about the fourth or fifth iteration of this during the election campaign. But what we do is look at polls from the preceding, typically 6 or 7 days, depends how many polls are coming out. Sometimes we do it a little more frequently than that. The numbers that are on the board right now are from the period, the week between May 23rd and May 30th. There were 7 polls that went into it. I won't list all the firms that are there. And we're finding some interesting results. One of the surprises, perhaps, is that even though the NDP is actually leading in popular vote, they are not leading in terms of seats. And that's because of the relative inefficiency of their vote. They're ostensibly wasting too many votes in places up north. And if people are looking at the province-wide map, you'll see that 80% of the province looks orange because that's Northern Ontario where they're going to sweep. Southern Ontario, not so much. Our numbers at the moment are 63, that puts the Conservatives right on the edge, really the cusp of a majority. That would be required. 63 for the Conservatives, 54 for the NDP, 7 for the Liberals. And perhaps in the questions, the discussion, we can go into a little bit of the dynamic of what's happened during the campaign.
All right, so let's get into that then, and maybe we can put the LISPOP map up for people to take a look at, because Ontario's a big place, and as we know in Northern Ontario, the ridings are geographically
enormous,
very large. And so when we look at this map and we say, holy geez, the NDP's winning all over. But in fact, that's not the case. And so we've got different shadings and different colors on here. And Barry, maybe I'll just ask you to take a second for our viewers, the difference between a darker orange, a lighter orange, a darker blue, a lighter blue, and then we've got some ridings that are showing up gray.
Lots of them.
Let people know what these are?
Yeah, the gray is for too close to call. A riding that we project, and if there's questions, we could talk a little bit about how the numbers get put together. Too close to call means that we're projecting that no party has a lead of more than 5%. And in that case, particularly because polls really should never be taken too literally, but rather in a plus or minus 3% at least. So anything that's within a 5% margin is gray. I can tell you right now that we have both the Premier's riding of Don Valley West and Doug Ford's riding of Etobicoke North in that category. Both of those are too close to call, so neither of them should feel particularly confident at the moment. But in any case, under 5% is gray. Between 5 and 10% is the pale color on the map of Northern Ontario. You'll notice that the area around Thunder Bay is a lighter color, kind of a yellowy orange. And that suggests that those seats, the Liberals did a little bit better last time. They're in the 5 to 10% range. We also have light and dark blue, light and darker red. Anything where we project at the moment that a party has a lead of 10% or more, that's where the deeper color comes into play.
All right, so we can take from this then that the NDP is leading in pretty well all of Northern Ontario, and then as we come further south, we start to get into various shades of blue and a bit more gray. I do want to ask you, so you mentioned Doug Ford's riding at Etobicoke North, which until now, since 2003, has been held by Liberal Shafiq Qadri. Is he Doug Ford's main competitor in Etobicoke North?
Probably not, although we were talking just before the podcast about three-way ridings. If there is anything that approximates a three-way competition, Etobicoke North isn't a bad example. Qadri is the incumbent, but the NDP has always been competitive in that riding, and they're now boosting it. But also Doug Ford's prominence means that the Conservative, and his background in that area of North Etobicoke, means that that's a riding in theory that could go any way. My hunch is the real competition there, though, is going to be between Ford, who should have a bit of an edge, but it's going to be close, and the NDP.
And in Kathleen Wynn's riding, is she up against a conservative challenge?
Probably, yeah. Don Valley West is much less likely to go NDP. The NDP is doing, for people that are interested in Toronto, the NDP does very well in the southern downtown part. Most of the ridings from Scarborough on, at least to Etobicoke Lakeshore, not including Etobicoke Lakeshore, but all the ridings that sort of border on the waterfront, usually the NDP does pretty well, and they'll certainly be competitive in York South. Number of Scarborough ridings as well. But in the riding of Don Valley West, I would suggest, and the other ridings where the Liberals are relatively strong, and there aren't very many like that. But those are the more upper middle class kind of ridings like not just Don Valley West, but also the Rosedale seat, St. Paul's, which is Forest Hill, Toronto Centre. Also Vaughan. The Vaughan is the one other area in the Toronto area where the Liberals, if the Liberals hold seats in Toronto, it's going to be largely those seats. Don Valley West they have a shot at, but that's going to be more challenging.
And there is one riding that Liberals almost always bank on. It's called Ottawa-Vanier. I think we're still showing that one as being.
But we have in our map we have those are now all pink. We know there are no salt. That means all of those, the margins are less than 10% for the Liberals at the moment.
So there are no safe ridings for the Liberals anymore.
Some are relatively safer, but there are some other people doing projections, as I do, that in fact have the Liberals down to even fewer than the 7 seats we're counting at the moment.
I think I saw one aggregator that actually suggested they could win as few as 1.